So a couple of things, I suppose, before I start. One, my take is going to be slightly different, or different emphasis to the rest of the talks today, whereas I'm going to talk about the mathematics community and some of the work we are trying to do within our mathematics department, as opposed to specifically talking about mathematics support. There are a couple of things I will highlight in relation to that as well, because I think they are relevant. But that's one thing. I should also say that what I'm about to kind of share with you isn't rocket science in any stretch of the imagination, and it's very much early doors with what we've been trying to do. So we don't have much, if any, in terms of measuring the impact of some of these things. But I wanted to perhaps take an opportunity to share some of the things we're doing, and also perhaps to get you to share some of your ideas as well, which is why I'm going to be using for this presentation Menti, which you can access using the URL and code that is on the top of the screen. But towards the end of the presentation, there'll be opportunity for you to kind of share some things directly, if you so wish. Okay. So what is it then? You know, where's the motivation for this? Well, you know, I think prior to the pandemic, and the university itself were already looking at learning communities and how that might be developed further, because there were already questions being raised around engagement broadly across the university, and not least in our own department. And I suppose what the pandemic has done, not just with that, but in a number of areas, is really exacerbated that kind of the levels that we're talking about. So if nothing else, the pandemic really has given us opportunity to really go back and rethink what we value, what it is we're trying to encourage, and how we might go about that. So that's part of our motivation, at least. Some of the evidence, if you like, that is here around the impact, or the potential impact around learning communities, I think is quite well documented, not least in terms of potentials for supporting retention. I've mentioned engagement, which is particularly what where we were coming from, but also motivation, well-being, and various other aspects of the broad kind of student experience, if you like, and what that means both as part of the curriculum or part of the kind of formal activities and externally, and the different impacts that that can have. So in addition to that, the university itself had a student partnership project looking at learning communities, which commenced prior to the pandemic and ran through it as it happened. And they established a number of key findings, but there were a particular couple of those that kind of resonated with us in terms of the mathematics department. And the first one of those was students were saying, were highlighting the impact of feeling isolated, isolated from each other, so from others on their programs of study, isolated from their faculty, their departments, and so on. So one of the things we were trying to do is, right, what could we do to try and address some of this? Because not just sitting in an analysis lecture, what else could we do to encourage or give opportunity, if you like, for students to meet? The second thing then was around communication and belonging within the department, and some indicators of a sense of hierarchy was one of the barriers that were highlighted, amongst other things, that related to all forms of kind of communication and just being part of something within the institution, and the impact that was having on their engagement. So that's what we were looking to try and address. So what is it then that we've done effectively? Well, I'm going to highlight some of the formal changes in addition to some of the more informal changes, because I think we've taken the approach that whilst we're trying to develop community, we appreciate that there are lots of potential different communities within that. So some of these, oh, sorry, didn't mean to do that. There we go. Some of these changes you won't be able to change very quickly, but we were very lucky to get a new building. So I'm not suggesting that you go out and just grab a new building somewhere, but I think it is relevant because what it immediately provided us with, which we didn't have previously, was an environment where we could welcome students to feel part of something physical. And not least whilst now we're trying to encourage more students back onto campus, there are in our new building lots of spaces for students to sit and work, and in an informal setting as well. So not just the formal classrooms, down every corridor, you'll see spaces of this type. So again, that's something that we've never had in our old building and never been able to kind of encourage as part of what we could call a community, if you like. So we're seeing a very positive impact just based around environment. And the buzz around the building is a million miles away from where we were previously, even though it is literally down the road. Okay. What else? Well, people have been given responsibility and time to really focus on this. So we have a professional services member of staff, student engagement officer that has started very recently within the school. They work with our new student voice coordinator. We used to have a student academic rep coordinator, but that role has been kind of expanded now. So as I said, it's given people ownership and responsibility to really try and push this agenda, which I think is key. Then we've also changed the complete emphasis of our induction sessions. We've tried so many things during induction, from concentrating on prior learning to looking at how you learn, and refresher classes, all these different things. So this year we decided, in line with this sense of community, we went back to basics and really focused on, let's get students to speak to one another. Let's give them opportunity to mix and to find out who their colleagues are, or who their peers are that they are studying with. And I have to say, I run those sessions myself, and they were particularly energizing for myself, I would say. I won't go into some of the details there, but at least to say, we started a session with a typical, does anyone have any questions? And there was tumbleweed. Nobody blinked because they were all looking at the floor or the ceiling, right? But by the end of the session, through lots of kind of little nudges in, hopefully in the right direction, I couldn't shut the group up. We were there beyond time. People were asking open questions in front of everyone. They were replying to Menti. They were really, really, I would say, engaging in the kind of discussions that we were trying to encourage. So that, for me, was a particular positive. Mentioned some of the changes to math support. We have space in the building, in our new building, but we don't have a room. So it is an informal space. It's a very different space to what we've had before. And this has coincided with a new building called the Centre for Student Life, where we are now hosting math support. again, in an informal space. So we've changed the timings, we've changed the spaces that we use, we've changed location, and of course, we're trying to re-establish everything after the pandemic as well. So it really is taking a lot to try and kind of develop that, but I'm glad to report that at least over the last few weeks, we are seeing an upward trend in our drop-ins and things again. Again, I won't highlight this too much, but part of our formal program, particularly in year one, we've introduced flipped learning in a large core module. And whilst this may not directly, you think, apply to community, what it has done is taken us as lecturers from the front to be amongst the students. And the biggest take home that I've had from that is that you genuinely get to see what the students are doing in every session, and you can react to that in real time. And you get to know what students are struggling, which students you can perhaps push a bit more, and so on. So again, something that I would say has been positive. Coming out of that, we've run an integration bee, which loads of students, I was surprised, kind of got involved with. And we're now looking at kind of running that again in competition this academic year. So those are, I would say, formal changes. Then the informal activities that we've got planned are already happening. We're running away day. If anyone has any thoughts about run away days, I'd be really interested to hear, because we were due to go to the Brecon Beacons and potentially up Pen y Fan for our away day. But we haven't been able to organise that yet for a number of reasons, but that's still in the offing. We run board game hours within the building. Again, just any board game. If people want to play chess, if they want to play Connect 4, whatever it is, whatever we've got, we'll just come there and kind of socially play games. One of our members of staff is responsible for teaching programming in year one, but has extended that to all students in all years, where if they're interested in programming and coding, what is it they want to do? Come along. And again, there's another community now that is developing there that are looking at all manner of different things. We've run a couple of, or one movie night, which we've asked students to vote on. So I think it was Good Will Hunting was the first film that we've watched, and they've just voted for their Christmas film to be Die Hard. What else, I suppose? So again, informal social activities that we're again trying to establish and give choice to students around what those are, what it involves, and trying to involve things like our math society within the school as well. And there's plans for lots more of these things to happen throughout the spring semester as well. So kind of in summary, like I said, whilst we don't have detailed analysis of some of the things that we've been trying to do, what wrong button, excuse me. What I would say is that we've tried lots of different things. Some will have larger uptake, some will have smaller, but not to underestimate some of the small changes that can be made by all of us to support some of these ideas of community. And just a couple of those things that we've been highlighted, or we've had highlighted, I should say. For example, the way in which you address students via email was one, where dear students, was again perhaps supporting this idea of a hierarchy. And it's been shown in a number of areas how simply changing that to dear fellow mathematicians, or I teach a module on teaching, so dear educators, and how that can have a sense of a different perspective, if you like, of a sense of togetherness and community. Providing different alternatives, for example, in a classroom for students to engage in different forms of discussion. Little things that, like I said, we could all do, but could potentially have a big change in how students can subsequently interact and feel part of something. Diversity, choice and ownership. I think this is a big thing with any learning community. Understanding that different people will engage with different things at different times for different reasons. And so trying to consider different options and choice in those options, I think is vitally important. You won't be able to do everything all the time, but at least trying to appreciate that, I think, is important. But also recognizing that it's ownership. Students, staff, everyone, is part of that community and needs to feel that they can do something about it. So getting students involved in the planning and scheduling and organising of all those things, rather than us reacting to students, I think is very important. And just to finish, we've concentrated perhaps more on the student side of things. But in all honesty, staff are no different to students, in that we have to consider how they might engage, what they might want to engage with, the different responsibilities they have. It's already been mentioned about flexible working, for example. Whilst we're encouraging students back onto campus, quite often staff are only there on certain days of the week. Okay, I'm not saying that's a bad thing from someone who's presenting from home, right? But perhaps we need to give more thought as to if we want those interactions and those connections to be made, we've got to perhaps give thought to that side as much as the student side as well. So I probably have run over, so apologies. If anyone does want to share their experiences, then if you go onto the Menti page with that code, you can certainly add, or please do add any of your suggestions to that. And I'll stop at that point, just for Sue's sake. And obviously, if there are any subsequent questions, I'll be happy to try and to answer them as best I can. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rob. And yes, I mean, obviously, if people want to fill in the Mentimeter comment for Rob as well, and or put things into the chat, that would be very useful. And I apologise that there are not going to ask anyone if they can ask you any questions at the moment, because we are running very late time. I thought I was doing well, and apparently I'm not. But thank you so much, Rob. That was really, really interesting. And yeah, it is a lot of the things about doing engagement is really good and definitely food for thought. So thank you very much.